Without a doubt, one of the most common questions I see in one of my Outriders videos is, hey, I made my build exactly like your latest build guide, but I don't hit for that kind of damage. What am I doing wrong? And this is a really difficult question to respond to, especially since it is in text form in a YouTube comment section. But when I can get the poster to actually send me some of their build photos, like over on our Discord, it invariably shows that they are running a build vaguely similar to what I'm using, but with a ton of differences. And that is what is causing the huge variances in damage output or anomaly power damage or even tankiness. Outriders is a game of extremes, and if you want the best whatever, you have to fully invest into whatever category you want to excel in, and that means you have to have the perfect gear for your build. What's going on, everybody? It's LtBuzzLitebeer, and today I wanted to post a video that may be new knowledge for some of you and a refresher course for others. But before we dive into today's video, I wanted to again thank you for all the love you have been showing my Outriders uploads. And just in case you aren't yet a sub, please smash that sub button, and don't forget to ring the notifications bell to never miss a future upload from my channel. Let's go. So I originally started this guide as more of a basics of gear modding / theory crafting format, but it just quickly morphed into the definitive gear guide, where I just list out everything I could think of about the basics of gear, attributes, farming, and a bunch of other items. Now for your convenience, there is a timestamp, both in the video description and the pinned comments, and with that out of the way, let's begin. When it comes down to it, the differences between a fresh build, say like this baby Techno, versus a fully min-maxed CT15 capable Technomancer comes down to one item: gear. Gear is everything in Outriders, as without the exact right pieces, you can still do well enough, but you will never get the maximum results you want. Now, Outriders throws loot at you like rain, but you need to know where to best to find it, or farm it, as the more gear you can get your hands on, the better odds you will have of finding that exact right piece and or mods for your build. Now, since we're starting off at the beginning, let me quickly touch on the tiers of gear, starting off with common, often referred to as white gear. Now, common gear is the tier of loot you receive when you were first starting off your campaign playthrough and does nothing more than give you a little extra armor. Common tier gear does not feature any additional attributes or mods, and it can't be upgraded. Now, next up is unusual or green tier, and this tier will feature higher armor rolls than common gear and is the first tier of gear to also add on attributes. Okay, full stop right here. In case you didn't know this, and you can be a grizzled Outriders veteran or even a newbie, but if you're looking to assemble the absolute best builds in the game, this is one of the tiers of loot you need to pay close attention to. Unusual tier gear makes it really simple to understand because all you need to focus in on is the attributes. Now, my shown example here has 3 attributes because I purchased this on a level 50 character, but when you first play through the game, you would normally just see 1. But as you get a bit further into the game, expect to see those 3 attributes, and here is where your perfect build begins. Now, more on this later in the farming section of this video. Continuing on, the middle tier of gear is rare tier, also known as blue gear, and this will give you slightly better stats and will now add on one tier 1 mod specific to the class you are using. Second to last is epic gear, aka purple gear, and this will again give you better stats along with one tier 1 mod and one tier 2 mod. And the final tier of gear is legendary tier, and these are often referred to as golds, yellows, or Legos. Legendary items come standard with one tier 2 mod and one tier 3 mod, and many players consider these to be the absolute best pieces in the game, but don't be fooled, because you can construct just as capable a build, maybe even a little bit better, by using nothing but epic tier loot and then adding on the best mods to suit your build. Sticking with the theme of gear, let's talk numbers, more specifically attributes, because having the right attributes along with the correct mods takes your build from mild to absolutely freaking wild. Now, as I stated earlier, gear items that are at least of unusual tier or higher will come standard with attributes. And think of attributes as active enhancements to your build stats that are always present and just working away in the background. Now, the higher level a piece of gear is, the more attributes it will have. Each piece of gear can have a maximum of 3 different types of attributes, with gear items starting at level 11 and higher having 2 bonus items, while gear starting at level 21 and higher will feature the maximum of 3 attributes. Gear features 1 primary attribute of bonus firepower, anomaly power, or maximum health, and can then have any 2 from the secondary attribute pool of skills life leech, close range damage, long range damage, cooldown reduction, status power, or healing received. Any gear that is below legendary tier and features 3 attributes will be randomly generated, meaning that there are no constant or static set pieces of gear to be found in the game. However, legendary loot is the opposite. It's always static, meaning it will always be found with the same 3 attributes and the same 2 talents. However, one item that is always randomized is the armor rolls on gear and the firepower rolls on weaponry. And this holds true for every piece of gear and weapon in the game, including legendary tier. So, not only are you looking for the exact right attributes on your gear because they cannot be recalibrated, but you're also looking for the correct talents. And then you're always on the hunt for the highest armor rolls on gear or the highest firepower ratings on weaponry. And FYI, for gear, the highest armor roll that can be found in the game is 11.3 thousand. And just throwing this out there, even though I'm not actually covering the weaponry, but the highest firepower rating currently in the game is 99.4 thousand. Now, my advice here would be, if you find a piece of gear that has the exact attributes you are wanting, even if it is currently at a much lower level than, say, the maximum at 50, my advice is to still keep it. Now, through upgrades and careful modding, you may have a god roll item on your hands and not even know it. Sticking with this theme of attributes, and I often get asked what exactly it is they do, what effects do they have? And here's your answers. For primary attributes on gear, there are 3 options. Bonus firepower. I think it's pretty obvious here that it increases your weapon damage, and at level 50 gear will max out at 8,038. There's also max health, which increases your character's overall health value, which gives you a bit more incoming damage cushion and will reach a maximum of 4,442 on level 50 gear. And finally, there is anomaly power, which increases the damage dealt by melee, skills, and status effects. Now you can see just how much your AP increases your damage by looking in the display under the skill damage bonus heading. Now onto the 6 secondary attributes, and let's start off with close range damage, which increases your weapon damage at close range. By default, that is anything closer than 10 meters, and this will max out at 10%. You also have long range damage, which increases weapon damage at long range, which by default is anything further than 18 meters away. Again, this maxes out at 10%. There's also healing received, which increases the amount of health restored through direct healing, and this attribute does not affect leech or regeneration and maxes out at a value of 18%. There's also skills life leech, which will heal you for a percentage of the damage dealt by a skill. This includes melee and damage over time. Expect a 4.49% maximum on gear for this attribute. There's also status power, which increases the effectiveness of your status effects. For burn, bleed, and toxic, it increases the damage done. And for ash, freeze, vulnerable, and weakness, it increases the duration of the effect. And status power will max out at 30% on gear. And finally, we've come to cooldown reduction, which obviously decreases the cooldowns on your skills and maxes out at 7.49% on gear. Now remember that once you start looting level 21 gear and higher, it will come with 3 attributes made up of one of the 3 primary attributes, bonus firepower, max health, or anomaly power, plus it will roll randomly with 2 of the secondary attributes of close range damage, long range damage, healing received, skills life leech, status power, or cooldown reduction. Okay, so we've quickly refreshed ourselves with gear tiers, the attributes, and the levels they can be found on gear, but where can you find these pieces? How can you efficiently farm for the pieces to best suit your builds? And that answer has many different subsections, starting off with the vendors. Now, in general, vendors are sometimes a forgotten element after you progress through the storyline a bit, but I have found some of my perfect pieces just using the vendors, and that's why I always recommend you check them constantly. Now, the first two vendors are located in Rift Town and are within feet of each other. Gregor Ram sells nothing but gear, while Eva Lopez specializes in weaponry. Gregor is at his shop from the very beginning of your campaign playthrough, but Eva will need to be rescued as part of the Mr. Chang side mission before she will assume her role in the weapons vendor location. Moving on, Trenchtown is where you can find the next two vendors, and both are located fairly close to your central spawn location. Rough Pavlo, the weird guy sitting down wearing the gas mask, only sells rare or epic tier gear, whereas Eric Rib, located just up the hill, offers up the equivalent forms of rare and epic tier weaponry. Now, the next vendor is often forgotten about, but can be found at the Forest Enclave map location. Just jog from the base camp into the forest village and you will find Mercer Acosta sitting at his tent, and he features both gear and weaponry. Also, Mercer does sell everything from common, green gear, on up to epic or purple gear, and sometimes his lower level offerings are exactly what you want in terms of attributes, or for those base tier 1 mods. The final two vendors actually travel around everywhere with you, those being Bailey and Tiago. Now, Bailey can sell anything, gear or weaponry ranging from common on up to epic, while Tiago sells epic gear and weapons along with legendary items. Every piece of gear or weaponry can be purchased for the scrap currency except legendaries, which will require you to pay Tiago with drop pod resources, only obtained for finishing challenge tier expeditions. Maybe you're a bit scrap poor and want to just farm for your items. You know what? I've got a few spots I can recommend to rack up the most amount of loot items in the shortest amount of time. The first two spots will require you to visit Noah, the barkeep in Trenchtown, and accept his Monster Hunt questline. Now, you don't need to complete the entire darn thing, or even do it on the highest world tier you currently have unlocked. In fact, I would actually recommend you lower your world tier down significantly for lower tier items. Just make sure you aren't too strong for the enemy targets to kill. So the first map location you want to go to is the Gate, where you can find Wendigo. I'm actually on a world tier 3 as I record this footage, and all you need to do is run into the battle area, run past all the smaller enemies, wait for Wendigo to jump down, melt this monster, and then wait for the other small enemies to kill you. A quick side note, at this point, if you haven't turned on the auto loot function in your menus, you need to stop right now and do so. Just dive into the options and select the auto loot icon and set it to the lowest tier of uncommon. This way, you will loot everything on the battlefield when you die. Okay, back to Wendigo. Now, once you die, you will respawn at the beginning of the encounter area. Just simply run back to the boss, melt him again, collect your loot, and just do it over and over again. Also, another great monster to farm is actually two bosses, which can be found at the Dunes map location. Again, activate the monster hunt here, make your way down to the Horus bosses, which are two identical behemoth bosses, melt them, wait for the other monsters to kill you, respawn, and hit them again. Many times I find my perfect build guide pieces from either one of the vendors or from one of these two monster hunt farming locations. Another good location involves you going to your main menu, activating the select story point icon, scrolling over to the dunes, and then selecting the story point where you find the source of the distant light. Now, FYI, don't attempt this one on your highest world tier, but instead, select one that is several levels below your current max. Just run into the mission area, melt the single elite boss, collect your loot, and just wait for the surrounding Pax riflemen to kill you. You will respawn at the bottom of the hill, so just run right back up there, kill the elite again, and just keep rinsing and repeating. Also, this is a really good way to grab nice amounts of materials, including titanium. And finally, you can also farm challenge tier expeditions, but this is not the most efficient way, as you will spend more time for less loot than if you were to farm, say, the Horus bosses over and over again. Still, if you are needing titanium and drop pod resources, expeditions are the best place to farm for both. At this point in the video, let's assume that you have reached the end game, or you're steadily building up through those challenge tiers and you want to get a bit more advanced with your gear farming and modding. So here's my tip number 1 for you, and this is my creed when it comes to farming gear, and that is to always start and end with the attributes. Now, since these stats are not able to be recalibrated, if you are looking for the most extreme builds out there, you simply cannot compromise on your attributes. If I'm farming, no matter if the gear piece has the perfect mods already on it, if the attributes are not what I am looking for, it immediately becomes scrap and I break it down for materials. Now, just as an example for you, not having cooldown reduction on one piece of gear could mean around an additional 1.5 second delay on getting my skills back off of cooldown. And when I'm trying to plow through a challenge tier 15 solo, you know what, that can feel like an eternity. So again, if you want the best builds, do not compromise on your attributes. Okay, tip number 2 assumes that you have a piece with the perfect attributes, and now it is time to pay attention to the mod and or mods. Unusual and rare tier gear are my favorites for farming, since they either come with just attributes or attributes in a class-specific tier 1 mod. Now, once you upgrade the gear, you will get to the point that you must decide if the mods are going to work for your build, and here's how I structure my thinking when it comes to modding. Even if I don't see the exact tier 1 mod I would like to begin with, the piece has not yet reached the level of I'm thinking it's junk. It is the upgrade from rare to epic tier when I move the piece from that single tier 1 mod to now having a tier 1 mod, plus I get to select from one of the 3 randomized tier 2 mods that really makes or breaks the piece. If during this upgrade I see a tier 2 mod I want for my build, I proceed with that piece of gear, because once I have that tier 2 mod, I have options available to me. I see that tier 2 mod as set in concrete, and then I can either adjust that former tier 1 mod, especially if it is not something I wanted, to whatever I would like. I can go with another tier 1, 2, or even tier 3 mod. The choices are really down to my build concept and what I already have on my existing pieces of gear. But be forewarned, the more pieces of gear you start to lock in with those perfect attributes and mods for your build, the harder it will become to find that final piece with those last 2 mods you wanted. For example, I have 4 pieces of my build completely dialed in, but have come down to say, I don't know, let's say my boots. At this point, I have to find boots with the exact attributes I want, and if I'm wanting a specific tier 1 mod for my build, that becomes another must-have, simply cannot budge on portion of my build. When it really becomes a bear to make this whole thing work is when you finally do loot those boots with the right attributes, with the correct starting tier 1 mod, because then the upgrade to 2 mods, when you take it from rare to epic tier, that moment when the game throws 3 random tier 2 mods at you to select from, well then that piece either seals the deal for your build or just becomes trash. Now FYI, I published a video months ago about a method for infinitely re-rolling that perfect starting piece of gear involving shutting down your system mid-recalibration, and if you want to see it, I will include a link to that guide in the video description. But I do want to throw out a few disclaimers. First, I don't know if that method still works. And 2, I don't know if using that method is now considered a breach of TOS and could therefore get you in trouble and or possibly banned. So if it still works, use it at your discretion. Also, for those of you looking to nab every exotic in the game as quickly as possible, there is a method involving a fresh character and getting carried through CT15s for the maximum drop pod resources. Now, I have not personally tried that out or posted any video guides for this method, but I could recommend you check out either Cloud Plays or DPJ, links in the video description to their content, as both of them have posted this mechanic and videos to their channels. For the final portion of this guide, I wanted to quickly cover creating a build. And believe me, this could be an entire video or even a series of videos unto itself. But to preface this section, I wanted to say that I feel that gear, loot drops, and the overall ease of constructing a CT15 capable build has never been in as good a spot as it is now. Now, for those of us that started Outriders at launch, it was a much harder prospect to find acceptable loot, and therefore builds took much longer to finalize. Since that time, the legendary drop rates have been significantly buffed. There was some sort of anti-dupe protection system installed, and I know it doesn't always work the way you would like it. And probably the most significant changes have been to legendary gear sets, and the fact that there are now builds for each class that can take advantage of these set bonuses. and discussing a build built around one of these legendary sets is where I would like to start. Now, you can absolutely construct an all epic gear build, and I have many times and have uploaded those build guides to my channel. But overall, making an all epic tier build is way harder than starting with 3 pieces of legendary gear. Let me show you. Using my Devastator as an example for this build, and by the way, pay no attention to the cosmetics, but I have gone with 3 pieces of Seismic Commander gear, plus I have used epic tier gloves and boots. Now, what makes these legendary builds easier, at least in my mind, is that for 3 of the 5 pieces of gear, I am not hunting for or farming for attributes or talents. Sure, I have to get the Seismic Commander pieces themselves, but with the legendary drop rate buffs and Tiago now allowing for rerolls, it is a much easier prospect. So back to these 3 Seismic Commander pieces, and since the set bonuses and mods tend to be matched, I'm really only concerned with 1 mod on each of these 3 pieces. Already the build concept is becoming pretty simple. My main focus needs to be on finding gloves and boots with the correct attributes, and once I have them, I then filter down to those gloves and boots that have the right attributes and a mod I want for my build, or when I upgrade them from rare to epic tier, that a mod appears that I want for my build. If I get super lucky, I find epic tier gear that has the attributes, and one of the 2 existing mods is already in place, and all I need to do is select the second mod to transfer onto the piece, and voila, I'm done. I find it much easier finding 3 legendary pieces with static attributes and worrying about looting 2 more pieces with the correct attributes and mods versus looting 5 epic pieces trying to find the exact attributes I want on all 5 pieces and then starting up the mod dance as I switch mods in and out based on what I found and how to assemble all 10 of the mods onto a build. Believe me, for those of you starting the game recently, it is a much easier prospect for you than versus me when the game first launched. Now, in terms of builds, I find that if you spend a bit of time prepping and planning it all out, like for me, I'm a bit old school, but I actually write out my builds on a notepad, and then as I find acceptable pieces and mods, I take the time to actually scratch it off the list. The build is done when every item has been eliminated from that list. Anyways, if your head is spinning from all the information I've been throwing out in this video, try reducing the pressure a bit and just select a class based on what you like to do. Once you've made that decision, try running a quick YouTube search for a build built on the class you've already selected. I have posted many of them to my channel, and there are thousands more posted all over YouTube. For those of you that have joined my Discord server, we actually have 2 channels completely designated to builds. One for posting your own builds for critiques or questions. The other is where we use the BOSified Outriders app. Link in the video description, and I highly recommend you try it out. But anyway, we create a completely structured build schematic with the class trees, skills, gear, mods, and weaponry. Whatever resource you end up basing your build on, trust me when I tell you to keep that list of items and keep looking, looting, and modding until you have every item scratched off. As I start to close down this guide, I wanted to make a general statement when it comes to gear and creating a build, and here it is. I find that many times players are too cautious in their build designs and they lean too heavily on sustain or defensive mods. Now, I'm not some pro-level MLG player, and on 3 of my 4 builds that I use every day, I do not use a single sustain mod, not one. The only build that I do use, Mitigation from Death, is on my Trickster, and honestly, that is because that mod is on a piece of gear that I haven't been able to replace, and I have already used the recal on the other mod slot. Anyways, too often I see players running a 6-4 or 7-3 ratio of offensive to defensive mods, and in my opinion, that is way too much. Now, towards the beginning of this video, I made a statement that Outriders is a game of extremes. And I have found through my personal experiences with this game that if you invest heavily into damage mods, you can simply overpower the content and actually heal through most incoming damage spikes. Outriders is a game that operates a bit different than other looter shooters, and that our characters heal through inflicting damage. So in order for us to survive, we have to kill. Now, if you can construct a build that is extremely efficient at killing quickly, you can actually stay alive, even when surrounded and severely outnumbered. It's when you have invested too heavily into defensive mods that I find that players start to have problems. Sure, you're able to withstand more incoming damage, but once you start to try to fight back, you'll find that you aren't able to finish off enemies quickly enough, and then the problems begin. you will quickly get swarmed, and despite having those 3 or 4 defensive mods on your build, you will get downed because they outnumbered you and were able to overpower your defense. So you know what? Live a little. Throw caution to the wind and go for a 9-1 or even a 10-0 build concept and see how you enjoy it. As long as you don't stand out in the open and attempt to face tank huge mobs, you'll find that with that much damage output, you can actually heal through most situations. As always, I look forward to reading your feedback in the comments section below. Don't forget to smash that sub button and ring the bell to receive all future upload notifications from my channel. If you could be so kind as to rate and or share this video, it really goes a long ways towards getting it promoted within the YouTube algorithms. I mention this every Outriders video, but you are all invited to join my community Discord server, which has ballooned to nearly 4,200 members. Just check in the video description, click on the open invite link, accept the rules, and you are in. We've got a dedicated and experienced group of mods waiting to get you pointed in the right direction, along with channels for builds, tips and tricks, and the extremely popular LFG, or looking for group areas. Don't get overly frustrated with the lack of a decent matchmaker or in-game comms. Join my Discord and be in a group up on mics, knocking out your chosen content in a matter of minutes. Trust me when I say that we've got an awesome Outriders community and have every angle already covered for you. Also, don't forget to find and follow me on Twitch for weekly streams, and of course, you can follow me on Twitter for all my latest posts concerning most things gaming related. Links to all of these platforms in the video description below. Until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.